Welcome to 21st Century Common Sense, a bold reform agenda for our broken, gridlocked, dysfunctional, and boring politics. This is one of a series of 4 presentations that discuss challenges to our democracy, proposed fixes to those challenges, a special focus on the proposed fix to gerrymandering, and a first draft of a revised constitution designed to fix all of these challenges at once. This second presentation focuses on proposed fixes to the election system challenges described in the first presentation. Given all of the challenges, our ship of state certainly needs some repair. Several of the fixes proposed in this presentation address more than one challenge, so you will not see a one-to-one relationship between challenges and fixes. We propose ranked choice voting in all federal, primary, and general elections. From the voter's perspective, ranked choice voting, or RCV, is fairly simple. The voter marks a first choice, a second choice, and a third choice for each office being contested. After the voting is done, the candidates are ranked in the order of first choice votes. If the candidate with the most votes does not have a majority, then the candidate with the fewest first choice votes is eliminated, and all of the votes for that candidate are reassigned to each voter's next highest choice. This process continues until one candidate has a majority. The Founding Fathers were immensely afraid of the formation of factions, the 18th century word for political parties. We need to rediscover some of their fear and institute reforms that will enhance democracy while reducing the dominance of the Republican and the Democratic parties. When political parties use caucuses, conventions, and closed primaries to select general election candidates, a plurality of voters are shut out of the process. So let's fix this. Voters, not political parties, must select all general election candidates through primaries. States conduct an open primary for every federal office, and all registered voters are able to vote in it. All candidates for each federal office compete in the same primary. All primaries occur simultaneously during the one national primary election, and each primary will have 3 winners. These 3 primary winners are the only candidates that will appear on the ballot in the general election. Political parties will still have a role to play. They can bring people together around issues or ideology. They can support individual candidates. They can engage in fundraising and campaigning. They can continue to hold caucuses and conventions at their own expense. However, these activities will have no legal impact on the candidate selection process. We need to shorten, simplify, and democratize the process of selecting presidential candidates. We should replace the position of vice president with an elected chancellor of the Senate. We must replace the electoral college system with the direct election of the president. The next few slides elaborate on these suggested reforms. Here is the much shortened and greatly simplified schedule and procedure for federal elections. Congress adjourns in July. Candidates declare themselves and campaigning begins. No one can begin fundraising while Congress is in session. Congress does not meet again until the new Congress convenes in January after the election. On September 15th, primary election ballots are mailed to every registered voter. Primary elections occur from October 1 through October 15th. On November 15th, general election ballots are mailed to every registered voters. General elections occur from December 1st through the 15th. Note that the presidential transition is shortened to about a month. Note that this scheme builds upon the other reforms already described: ranked choice voting, open primaries, and 3 primary winners. The second most important position in our democracy should be elected rather than appointed. Further, the vice president has little real authority or power. Finally, we have experienced the gradual consolidation of political power in the presidency, what is often referred to as the imperial presidency. This solution solves all of those challenges at once. By electing the chancellor to a 4-year term in what we now call the midterm election, the chancellor election will have its own focus and dynamic. After elected as chancellor, the incumbent may be positioned for a run for the presidency 2 years or 6 years later. As the VP is now, the chancellor will be first in line of succession to the presidency. By giving the power to appoint judges, the position of chancellor really becomes important. The tendency toward the imperial presidency is reduced, and yet the chancellor's new powers do not impinge on the executive branch, since this power is one of those points in the separation of the powers where the branches overlap. 58% of Americans believe that the candidate with the most votes should win the presidential election, just like occurs in every other democracy and in every American election except our most important one. This constitutional change makes every voter equal. It also means that the 41 of 50 states currently ignored in presidential campaigns could now expect to receive some attention. It might be possible to bring about the direct election of the president without a constitutional amendment. This is a move called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. When enough states that constitute 270 electoral votes pass it, then the person who wins the national popular vote will get the electoral votes from all of those states and will win the presidency. We need a representative Senate, which requires a constitutional amendment. In the new Senate, the number of senators apportioned to each state will equal 1 senator for every 5 representatives, with fractions always rounded up, to a maximum of 6 senators for any state. So a state with 1 to 5 House seats would have 1 senator. Those with 6 to 10 House seats would get 2 senators, and so on. Those with 26 or more House seats would have 6 senators. As at present, senators will be elected at large for 6-year terms, and 1/3 of the Senate will be elected every 2 years. The only criteria for drawing congressional districts will be to equalize the populations of all CDs in a state, to keep neighbors together, defined as people who live in the same zip code, and to draw compact CDs as far as possible. No other criteria are allowed, such as race, ethnicity, income, education, social class, religion, rural versus urban, or party affiliation. We propose a gerrymander fix which meets these basic criteria and which also satisfies the following objectives: no human decisions, an entirely rule-governed process, the same process in every state, a process that is completely transparent and replicable. Any high school civics class should be able to draw the CDs for any state, and the results will all be the same. The proposed process consists of drawing reference and scan lines on a state map, dragging the scan line across the map, and adding zip code tabulation areas, or ZCTAs, to the current CD until that CD reaches the necessary population for a CD in that state. As an example, we drew the 13 CDs for North Carolina based on county population data from the 2010 census. Please see the gerrymander fix presentation for the details on how reference and scan lines are drawn for each CD and how the ZCTA scanning process works. We pride ourselves on being the world's oldest and most vibrant democracy. Yet on the most relevant measure of our democratic practices, namely our participation in voting, our performance belies our oft-stated beliefs. We simply must do a lot better. These reforms are designed to dramatically increase the percentage of eligible voters who are registered to vote and then who actually vote. Automatic universal voting registration is fairly easy to implement. When they turn 18, most young people are in school, and so the schools can handle the registration process. Citizens should also have their voter registration automatically created or updated such as a change of address, whenever the citizen interacts with government, for example, to pay taxes, apply for a passport, or buy or sell property. To implement universal registration, the National Voter Registration Authority must assign a unique voter ID number to each voter, which remains with that voter for life. When an election takes place, states conduct the election using voter registration rolls obtained from the National Voter Registration Database. Every election will have a 15-day voting window. All votes are submitted by mail and must be received by the last day of the voting window. During each of the last 5 days of the voting window, state election officials must announce each candidate's first choice vote totals. For the primary and general elections of the Chancellor and of the President, a National Vote Tabulation Authority collects vote counts from the states and announces the winners. To implement the fixes proposed herein, we suggest a single constitutional amendment on elections, which will include the following. An end to gerrymandering. A new representative Senate. The Chancellor of the Senate replaces the Vice President. Term limits for both chambers of Congress. Ranked choice voting for all federal elections. Open primaries for all federal elections with 3 winners in each primary. In even-numbered years, a national primary takes place in October for every member of the House, for 1/3 of the Senate, and for either the President or the Chancellor. The general election occurs in December. Congress is in adjournment from July 4th of election years until after the election. This means no more lame duck session and a much shorter presidential transition period. Fundraising by any candidate for any federal office is not permitted while Congress is in session, and voting rights are greatly expanded. We have briefly described quite a few electoral reforms in this presentation. How can we ever hope to achieve them? One significant impediment to fundamental change is that constitutional amendments are so difficult to pass. And one reason they are so difficult to pass is that the public has no voice in amending the Constitution. The process involves only Congress and state legislatures, all politicians. We believe that John Q. Public should have the main voice in the constitutional amendment process. Accordingly, we propose to replace Article 5 on amending the Constitution in its entirety. In the new scheme, states can propose an amendment, and even a citizen's petition can become a proposed amendment when half the states with at least half the population ask for it. Ratification then requires voter approval in 2 general elections separated by at least 1 general election, and the inauguration of a new president. In each of these 2 elections, ratification requires approval by a majority of all voters and a majority of voters in at least 60% of the states containing at least 60% of the population. Thank you for watching this presentation. Please view the others as well. For more information on the challenges, fixes, and draft Constitution 2, follow the link to the book on Amazon. You can also join the conversation at 21commonsense.org. Thanks again.